Hi, class. My name is Cody Barnes, and today we will be learning about moral relativism. So, moral relativism basically means that right and wrong depend on the moral code of a culture based on cultural norms. So, what does this mean? That basically the moral norms of a culture, what a certain group of people consider to be right, is right. What a certain group of people consider to be wrong is wrong. And it differs based on culture. There is no set standard of what is good or what is bad, and it is all open to interpretation based on a people group. So, there are a lot of people that support moral relativism, but there are a lot that negate it also. One thing that opposes moral relativism is the universality thesis, basically stating that there is universally valid moral standards that apply to all cultures. Now, this is completely opposing moral relativism, as it would state that there is no valid moral standards that apply to all cultures. So, this moral relativism goes hand in hand with context sensitivity thesis, which basically states that right or wrong is circumstantial. Facts about what is right and wrong depend on a certain instance. So, this is a basically think about it as you're coming across a drowning child. If you are able to swim, you have a moral obligation to go save that child. If you are unable to swim well and you may drown yourself, then you should not go out in that water, but you should morally go find someone else. So basically, if you come across a drowning child, whether you go in the water to save them or not depends on the circumstance of can you swim well? If yes, you are required. If no, you are not. So, right or wrong is dependent upon particular context. So, how does this tie into moral relativism? Moral relativism basically states that right or wrong varies based on culture. There is no set standard of right or wrong. So, I believe these two theories go hand in hand. As a culture, it could vary the context of what they consider to be right and wrong, and they could support each other in that way. So this bleeds in to another opposing view of moral relativism called moral diversity thesis, which basically states that conflicts are going to happen between different cultures. No, there are going to be different views of moral norms. There are going to be different views of right and wrong based on different cultures. Therefore, there is going to be conflict. This is not talked about much with moral relativism because moral relativism does not really seek to care about the conflict between different cultures arguing on right and wrong, because it would basically state it doesn't matter. It would basically state stick within your own culture and allow what is right to be determined based on your specific culture and don't worry about someone else's. So this bleeds into what is a moral norm. There are norms of prohibition and norms of requirement. So basically, there are norms of what is bad and norms that are good. Um, and a lot of cultures have a moral priority conflict, meaning they may see something as morally valid, but they attach a different level of importance to this value, meaning the severity, this could be for good or bad. So, something bad, a punishment for a crime. They could see, one culture could see a crime as very severe, while another culture does not. One culture could value something as good as another does not. Um, so basically, moral diversity thesis is just saying that with moral relativism, there is going to be conflict. So, what is a moral disagreement? There are fundamental moral disagreements, which are a disagreement over basic moral norms. So, you disagree on what you do consider to be right or what you do consider to be wrong. And then there are non fundamental moral disagreements. This would be a disagreement over non moral beliefs, meaning that you agree on the actual action being good or bad, but you disagree on something else along the way. It could be you disagree on the punishment for a crime, you disagree on the best way to make a positive outcome happen. And a lot of times, non fundamental moral disagreements can be rationally resolved with scientific investigation, meaning that there's actual factual data that can normally come into play, stating, well, if you do this, this outcome will have this success rate, something like that. So, non fundamental moral disagreements are more so questions that need to be answered, whereas fundamental moral disagreements are issues that are open to interpretation within moral relativism. So, with that, what are some of the problems of moral relativism? There is a problem of formulation. There is no consistency or determinacy. So, what is right and wrong is totally different based on where you go. And what is a culture? So, there is moral relativism does not seek to really understand what is considered a culture and who determines what is right and wrong. Another issue with this is a moral reformer problem. So, a moral reformer is someone who goes against the moral norms of their culture, meaning they do not agree with what is morally considered good or morally considered bad. So, how does this fit with moral relativism if culture determines what is good or bad, but people within that culture disagree with what is good or bad? This leads us into restricted moral relativism. So, restricted moral relativism basically states there is no universal morality, as cultures differ on what is right, yet there are things considered universally immoral. Therefore, culture is free to determine right for themselves fully, but certain actions, even if culturally accepted, may still be universally wrong. Restrictive moral relativism keeps a moral standard without limiting cultural norms, preventing immoral behavior that are culturally accepted. A huge example of this and a huge issue that people have with moral relativism is Germany during World War II. They did some unspeakable things, yet they believed in what they were doing. The culture supported it. Based on moral relativism, that would state that it is right. But restrictive moral relativism states that no, mass genocide and killing people is wrong. So we should not do it, regardless if culture accepts it. So I will conclude with Timon's quote that the topic of relativism in ethics is complex and potentially very confusing. This is because there is no set standard of right and wrong. And even if all cultures agreed on what is right, a moral relativism would state a new culture could come in and disagree with that, and they would be right in their own eyes. So it is complex, it is interesting to understand, and it is interesting to study. And I appreciate you all, and I hope you learned and know more about moral relativism. Thank you.